Hi, everyone. Good evening. We are here tonight for an exciting training and an opportunity to learn more about psychedelic harm reduction. I'm Kristen from Maine Access Points, and we have the honor of having the amazing, vibrant harm reductionist Tina Hallett here with us. And she has an amazing presentation that we're going to be able to go through together and learn more about psychedelics and what their effects are on our body. We know that we've had a lot of misinformation, and there's just a lot of misinformation out in general around psychedelics. We also know that lots of people use them regularly. They're empathogens. They bring us together with people. And so when we're using them communally, there also can be effects that maybe people don't expect. So we're going to go through all of that, and Tina will be able to talk to us a lot more in detail about that. We also know that sometimes some of the effects can bring anxiety, can bring heart rates up, can bring respiratory stuff. And so a lot of that, can come into play with some of the fear around fentanyl overdoses that we hear a lot about in the media. And there's a lot of misinformation about that as well. And so that was really part of why Maine Access Points wanted to bring Tina on, to be able to share the real information and also to just answer questions for people about things they might have heard or experienced that sort of doesn't really match up to what sometimes the media portrays about psychedelics. So I'm super stoked to learn. And Tina, I will hand it over to you. And we're so excited you're here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. My name's Tina. I use she, her pronouns. I have been working in harm reduction for about 5 years at this point. I have been using drugs for much longer than that. Psychedelics are my absolute favorite, so I'm really excited and honored to be here to talk to everyone about them. Right now, I'm currently working at AHOPE, which is run by the Boston Public Health Commission. We're right in downtown Boston on Albany Street. We serve around 8,000 people a year. And then we give out about 30,000 doses of Narcan a year, over 1 million syringes. And we have an exchange rate of 123%. So we're taking in that much more than we're giving out, which is...
So yeah, no big deal.
No big deal. Yeah.
No big deal.
Just a little bit of work. I'm really excited and honored to be there. I've been working with the AHOPE team since January. And it's incredible work just to see what everyone does every day. And before that, I was working with Kristen up in Gloucester at One Stop Harm Reduction Center. And I spent some time working with Kristen as well at the Cambridge Needle Exchange in Massachusetts. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. Thank you. Should we get started?
Yeah, totally. Cool. So I'm still going to try to figure out. Yeah. Can you see my slideshow right now?
Not yet.
Okay.
Now we can. We're in.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so psychedelic harm reduction. Super excited to talk about it. There are a lot of different substances that I'm going to try to cover with Kristen. We will see if we get through everything. Something I like to say at the start of trainings and conversations I have around substances and drug use, I learn the most from y'all. So if if I say something that doesn't jive with your personal experience, or you have questions or just want to chime in, please interrupt me. I'm totally cool with that. So I put a little agenda out here. We're quickly going to talk about what psychedelic harm reduction is, get into some drug checking stuff. We're going to cover a lot. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I love talking about it. And then the psychedelic overview and time at the end to address any questions or comments that we don't get to while the presentation is happening.
Awesome.
Yeah. You can still see my slides, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. I'm probably going to ask a lot more. So
I think the fact that they're, a little small is totally great because, you're going to go through everything. And if people have questions too, I'm going to monitor the chat. So we'll make sure that we get them sort of at the same time as they come in, maybe when you're mentioning stuff.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. So yeah, starting off with what are psychedelics and how do they work? Also called hallucinogens, they're a class of plants and chemicals that cause states of altered mood, cognitive processes, and perception, which is essentially the definition of any drug, but throwing it out there for y'all. Again, like every other substance, they're stimulating neurotransmitters in your brain, and that's what's giving you the effects. And I'm going to go in the overview around like the classic effects and how they affect people in general, but it's important to remember, like every other drug, they affect people differently, and a lot of it depends on like your set and setting. So like where you are at physically, but also mentally as well plays a huge role in how this stuff is going to affect you. So the Zendo project, I'm going to credit them here. They are incredible. And I'm going to talk about them more, but they essentially outlined the 4 basic principles of psychedelic harm reduction. The first one being creating a safe space. The second, sitting and not guiding the experience. Talking through and not down to the individual. So what that means is if someone is having a difficult experience while they're on psychedelics, you're going to be talking them through that experience as opposed to trying to talk them out of that, if that makes sense. And I'll get more into it. And then number 4, difficult is not the same as bad. Probably my favorite one. Important to remember.
Life lesson.
Yes, for sure. So starting off with set and setting, and initially with the drug. So what is the dose that you're taking? What is the duration of the substance that you plan on taking and the purity of it? Which, I mean, we know here in the US, all of this stuff, this is changing with decrim, which is really exciting, but a lot of this stuff is illegal, and therefore knowing the purity of what you're getting is really difficult. And we'll get more into that about drug checking. It all ties together. And this is also around like, how are you administering it? So are you sniffing it, smoking it, ingesting it orally? Intramuscular injection. There are many different like routes of administration that you can go with for psychedelics, and that plays a big role in how much it's going to impact you. Moving into set.
Tina, I had a question about administration. Can you boost psychedelics? Is that something that people can do? Okay, cool. Great.
Yes,
just wanted to check.
You can't. How could I forget boofing? I am so sorry about that.
Just wanted to make sure in case there's anybody wondering out there that needed to know.
Yes, no, definitely. Especially the most I know about boofing for psychedelics is with ketamine. And it's similar to like the IM injection as far as like the strength and like the rapid onset of the effects.
Cool.
All right, where was I? Set. So we're talking about our sort of like intention going into the trip. And I am not going to, I might sound a little hippie woo, but I'm not trying to. But you really want to go into using a lot of these psychedelics with some sort of intention. If you go in with the intention of like, I want to get as fucked up as I possibly can, like you're going to get as fucked up as you possibly can. But even if it's, I'm going in with the intention to work through this difficult experience I recently had, or I am taking psychedelics with this wonderful human that I have just started spending time with that I'm really excited about, like your intention going into it is going to play a huge role. And also that ties into your emotional state. If I'm super stressed out and really anxious about something and I'm just not having a good time mentally, taking, a full hit of LSD might help me work through some of that stuff. I might still consider doing it, but just the acknowledgement that you're not going to be laughing and running around the whole time, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, you know, what kind of experiences have you previously had when you've consumed the substance? I can give a little personal anecdote for this. When I was a junior in high school, someone told me that when you eat mushrooms, you are supposed to eat an eighth at a time. That's totally way too much. And like, no, not
You're
true.
so tiny.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. And I ended up having to interact with one of my friends' moms. She was like this very loud, angry Italian woman with crazy curly hair. And she was talking to me, and her hair was turning into snakes, and I was like flipping out. And I didn't take mushrooms again. I would think I was 17 when that happened. I didn't take mushrooms again until I was 28. Because that had affected me so much that I was terrified to take mushrooms again. When I did take them again, I watched Hook for the first time and cried, and it was a wonderful experience. So I like them again now, but it really does, like, your past experiences can carry over.
Yeah. And that moves into like the setting piece we're going to talk about, just around like you trusting that person who gave you the information. And a lot of times we listen to our older folks who have used drugs before or used different drugs, and maybe they don't have all the information either, and they pass down the wrong information for us. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving into setting, like you just said, like trusting the people you're with when you're taking psychedelics. Really, really recommend that. At least having like a few people around you, even if you're going to like a festival or something like that. Psychedelics are really popular in those settings. Having a few folks that you can really trust and communicate with is essential. Especially with a lot of psychedelics, we're talking about like a 6 to 10 hour experience you're signing yourself up for. So you're buckling yourself in for a ride, and you just want to have good folks with you. And then with like your physical environment and your setting as well, like noise, lighting, huge crowds of other people. Is this a place I've been to a million times? Like, again, for me personally, I feel pretty okay microdosing LSD or psilocybin mushrooms and going to the bar I've gone at for, 10 years that all of my friends work at, to like visit them for a drink while I'm out walking around on my journey. So I don't think I would feel that way going into a huge festival or like an unfamiliar place. Even going into a 7-Eleven to get a drink is really scary sometimes, or can be. So just being aware of where you're at when you're taking your dose.
For any substance sometimes, right? Like that can be not just psychedelics too.
Yeah, I would say all substances.
Yeah.
They have that for sure.
Not always possible, but when we can.
Yes. Harm reduction.
Yeah.
And then like getting into like deeper, like the role that trauma itself can play when you're, entering a psychedelic experience. Old trauma can come up for you and be relived while you're tripping. So I've heard anecdotal stories about people who are on DMT and they have experiences of reliving their birth, or dying and being reborn, or becoming one with the universal light and then emerging as a new person. And like that is super powerful stuff. But it can also bring up, childhood abuse, any sort of illness you might have gone through in your younger years, any instances of sexual assault, something like a car accident, war, depending on your history and where you're coming from, like all of that can come up. It's easy for me to say, as someone who is not inside of your body in that moment, that stuff typically comes up as an opportunity to try to work through some of it as a healing process. But that is really scary, and it's not always a good time to do that work. So it is, I tell people, just be prepared that is something that could come up for you. And it can also be transpersonal trauma as well. I am a person, like I know Kristen, you are as well. Like there's a lot of secondary trauma involved with doing like direct service frontline work. I also think it's important to acknowledge all of the trauma that we have experienced, as humankind throughout this pandemic with everything that's going on. It has been horrifically traumatizing. So that stuff, can play a role in what your experience ends up being like, but healing at the end of the day. And then, people, a really common experience when trauma comes up or you're having a bad trip while you're taking psychedelics is that you are crazy and that you are going to be stuck in the state that you're in forever. It's never going to end. Some people also, I have watched this happen to a few of my friends who have overdone it. They think that they're dead and that everyone around them doesn't know that they've died. And they're kind of observing the living world as a dead person, which is really scary. It's not permanent. So being gentle with people, and I'll get more into this, but just like being gentle with people, and you don't want to discredit how someone's feeling and tell them that it's not real, but really just like walking them through that with love and grace and comfort to the best of your ability. And then it's really going to sort of change your perception. You can experience huge shifts in your ego or ego death. And really sort of examine yourself and where you fall in the world as an individual within the greater scheme of life.
Big things. Yeah.
Big things, big important things for sure.
Some of those things happen also, like, can we feel them in our bodies when we're having a not so pleasant trip? Like, not just sort of in our emotional or mental state, but also physically in our body? Is that something that happens, or does it really depend on the person?
I would say it depends on the person, but absolutely. I mean, that can manifest as like super elevated blood pressure spikes, people getting not like a severe fever, but sort of overheating, like raising their body temperature. Clenched jaw is a big one.
My favorite.
Sure. Yeah, same. So yeah, your jaw might be sore the following day. And really just sort of like, how do I want to say this? Because it's not like frozen muscles or jerky muscles, but just like
rigidity.
Everything feels rigid. And uncomfortable, especially if that's tied into like a bad trip that has a lot of like paranoid elements and sort of delusional aspects. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Yes. I can't see the chat either. I just want to say, but that's fine. Okay. Creating a safe space, super important. And we really want to do this for everyone all the time, in my opinion, even if they're not using psychedelics, any drug, or if they're totally sober, we want people to feel safe. But really being, if you are the trip sitter, I will say, like being a present and grounded, empathetic person is going to go enormous lengths to making someone who's having a really bad time feel safe. You want to be kind. Don't talk down to people. Don't tell them they're tripping balls, or like start waving your hands in front of their faces or whatever. It's just not fun, and you're going to stress someone out way more. You also want to like respect people's boundaries, right? So letting people know you're there for support if they need to talk to you, but also don't make someone feel like they need to talk to you, because that can be really overwhelming and scary too. And you want to validate whatever they're experiencing and tell them that it's okay. That's super important to let people know, because you can really get trapped in like an isolating spiral when you are having a bad experience on psychedelics, and get really paranoid and worried about acting outwardly weird, or if people can see you, if people can tell that you're tripping too hard, and like you can get trapped in that spiral. So really just letting people know, like, whatever they have to do is totally okay. A lot like, when I'm with folks that might have taken too many stimulants and are overamping a little bit, like offering someone like a quiet spot where they can get away from all of the stimulation, like bright lights, crowds, loud traffic noises, whatever's going on. If you can get them somewhere that's more calm and more quiet, that's really, really going to help them become less overwhelmed and less disoriented. Also super important to not assume what people need is really what I should have started with, right? So we don't want to assume what people need. Asking them what they need to be more comfortable can be good. You just want to make sure you do it in an open-ended way where you are giving them, more pressure to then like try to figure out what they need. So if you're like, do you need water? Do you want a lollipop? Do you need some earbuds? Instead of just being like, what do you need? Can be really helpful to just throw actual things their way that they can say yes or no to.
Love that idea.
Yeah. I really, I have a hard time making up my mind and deciding what I want on a good day. So love that. And really just like the little reaffirmations that they're safe, that you are a safe person for them to be with, that you are not judging them, that you don't think they're stupid or they're really bad at taking drugs or whatever. Like, just be nice to them. And really, in some instances, it's helpful, and this isn't specific situations, but really differentiating yourself from like an institutional authority. So being like, I'm not a cop. You're safe. Like, I'm not going to tell anyone. Like, this can be confidential between us. Is really helpful for people, especially people who have institutional trauma, right? So, and also just like reassuring the person they are not going to be stuck in this experience for the rest of their lives. It can be, psychedelics are wonderful for this, but they can make you feel like you have discovered the secrets to life and you like unlocked this thing and you're making big plans for the rest of your life and the world and everything, which is super awesome. But like, you don't want to make any concrete life decisions of magnitude when you're tripping. Again, at the end of the day, you can't really control other people, but really try to dissuade any concrete decisions being made until the person is out of the experience. It is important, if someone's expressing suicidal ideation or any intent to harm themselves, to harm someone else, like, you want to try to ask that person for a little more information to gauge how serious that is. And it's also important here to remember, like, you don't have to do that by yourself. It's a really heavy thing to do, and you do want to keep people safe.
Including yourself.
Yeah. So definitely, like, never be afraid to ask for backup. Is my motto for everything. But you do, when people are expressing that sort of thing, you want to try to get a little more information before you take next steps, just to gauge how serious they are. Yeah.
That's important.
Sitting, not guiding. So you really want to be promoting, sorry, I need a sip of seltzer.
Yeah.
So we're fostering feelings of like acceptance, security, trust with individuals. and you want to help them turn inward into their experience as opposed to helping them run away from it. Again, I know that's easier said than done, especially when someone is having a super bad time right in front of your face, and it's hard to watch someone not having a good time, right? So you want to get them out of that as soon as you can and comfort them, but this stuff comes up for a reason. So if you are able to do it in a safe way where the person also feels safe, helping them sort of walk through that experience is really essential. And by, you can do that by just being calm, being a mediating presence, letting them know you're there to listen, and that you care about them. And you don't want to, when you're speaking to them, insert too much of your own narrative into it or assume where the trip is going. So you kind of want to let it unfold as it progresses and sort of meet the trip where it's at and meet the person where it's at, and just sort of, you're not trying to guide the trip, I guess. You're just there for the moment.
And you might be on your own trip, right? Like that's the other thing too. So if you're doing that together and you're having a good time and somebody you're with is not, like trying to support them or guide them to your trip is going to bring you probably down to a place where you don't want to be either. So it's really
yeah. And I think it's hard too. Like I have definitely been in the shoes of the person not having a super awesome time with, 5 friends that are having the best time ever. And like, I'm kind of panicking and acting weird, being like, well, I don't want to ruin everyone else's trip. So I'm just going to keep being weird over here. But like psychedelics are awesome because like people can sense when you're not having the best time, even if you're trying not to say anything or show it outwardly.
There's the empathogens. There they are.
So I think like, and it's hard because it does run the risk of ruining your experience, right? But I think just sitting with someone and holding their hand and not saying anything, like straight up, like does so much to chill people out and like, give people that feeling of unity and like grounding that they are not alone floating on this rock, stuck in this headspace, is super, super helpful. Also a big fan of like smell sensory stuff. So, if you have, I hate to be like, if you have essential oils or Palo Santo, but like if you have a scented candle or something like that can be super grounding for people. Just like introducing something new into the environment that is non-threatening can be really helpful. And then, give people permission. It's really scary to be vulnerable, right? Especially if you're already kind of scared about being really high. So giving people, the reassurance they need if, personal stuff starts coming up, that like what they're sharing with you is confidential and that like you are not going to judge them and they have full permission to say what they need to say. And I'm just going to follow that with like, but you also draw your own boundaries with that and make sure you're taking care of yourself and you're safe. It's really hard to sort of, I don't want to say trauma dump, but like take on a bunch of stuff that you weren't necessarily expecting, especially if you too are on psychedelics. So just being mindful and communicative as well about your needs and boundaries in a situation like that. Super important.
Tina, do you think that's something cool to do, like even before you maybe go on the journey together, like try to have that discussion about what some of your boundaries might be if you're like using with somebody else? I know that can be really vulnerable too because it's hard, but
yeah, no, I all about a good safety plan before consuming substances, especially more like long-acting psychedelics, like LSD, where it's literally like, okay, 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours, like we're going to be in it together. Like, so definitely establishing like, I'm not in a good headspace to talk about any sort of like physical trauma stuff, or I'm not in a good headspace for whatever. Or like, I literally will do this with my friends. I'm like, I am not the person that can go get candy and something to drink in the convenience store. Like, I'm going to need those things, but I will not be able to get them for myself. So, you know, which is like much less important than trauma stuff. But like having those discussions beforehand is a really good idea, and is also like super grounding when you're having your trip, to be like, oh, we kind of plan for this ahead of time. Like, you know, is a good grounding feeling that can make things less scary.
For sure.
I feel like I'm being a little repetitive, so I'll try to breeze through this one. But talking people through their experience, not talking them down from where they're at. You also, you know, we're never invalidating someone's perceived reality, especially when they're paranoid. Let them talk about how they're feeling and what they're seeing, even if you're not totally agreeing with their perspective. You can be very kind here, where you're not fully like, yeah, that person is totally trying to kill you right now, but also like not telling them that they are crazy and making it up, and to stop being so paranoid and worried. Also, you know, water does so much. Hydration is like so important.
We're 80% water, baby. That's intense. Yeah,
I know. I am not good with hydration, but I should be better. Everyone should be better. What someone drinking half a bottle of water can do for their state of being and their mindset is absolutely remarkable. So if you can offer someone a water or a Gatorade or something, like, that can really help them sort of come out of where they're at. You want to help them like connect with what they're feeling during their experience without distracting them. And also like really encouraging, I love, and it's not always doable, like the resources and accessibility isn't always there. If there's like any potential for some sort of art project or like task that's creative and art related, it's really awesome, especially if people are super paranoid, they're a little amped up, they're not having a good time. Like having them focus on that and do something with their hands is really, really helpful. Lying down, dancing, stretching, like that can change your setting enough that it can change your mental state and how your trip is going. Like truly, something as simple as like, oh, I was standing up, I'm going to lay on the grass for a minute, can be really helpful. And, you know, if it gets to the point where, you know, backup needs to be called as far as like paramedics or something like that, you just want to make sure that you're like staying with the person, being as calm as you can, and just reassuring them that like, hey, I'm going to stay with you until like backup gets here and we figure out how to like get you what you need. Like, because it's really scary to them be like, oh shit, now you're gonna have like people with uniforms come and talk to me. Like, absolutely not. So like just being like a steadfast person for someone in that instance is truly important. It is important to remember while validating people and showing them that unconditional love and positive regard and all of that beautiful stuff, if they're being aggressive, you need to attempt to set boundaries around that behavior. You know, by saying something like, you know, I hear you, I hear that you're angry. You can express your anger with words, like yell about it, whatever you need to do. But like coming at me and starting to be like physically aggressive or turning that verbal expression towards me or towards a specific person, where it becomes a safety risk, like you don't need to tolerate that. I like reminding people of that. Like, it's good to meet people where they're at, but your safety is the most important always.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, and the other thing with in some situations, they might not be seeing you, right? They might be seeing somebody else who has caused them harm in their past, or get to that point. So that's such a good point to sort of assess, keep reassessing while you're supporting somebody. Is this safe for me? Is this still safe for me? Can I still hang?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I've been harping on. Difficult experiences are not the same as bad experiences. It's so easy for me to say that right now when I'm not in it. And I would not say this to someone who was in it in that moment. So difficult life experiences offer like really valuable lessons to us, right? Gives us resilience. It gives us wisdom. It gives us, the ability to be compassionate and identify with other people. And like your emotional struggles can be prompted by the individual who's like trying to fight against their experiences. So like this can be activating for you as a trip sitter, as well as stuff coming up for you when you trip. So just trying to be as calm as you can, while still taking care of yourself. But offering encouragement to the person and reassurance is like a huge act of love that you can give someone, to give them, I guess, like the strength and courage to like keep moving through that trip, but like really just like supporting them through it. Offering the time and space for people to feel less afraid when they're tripping. I also like, if you can practice this with the folks that you're consuming psychedelics with or trip sitting for, allowing them the opportunity as they're then integrating this experience after they aren't tripping anymore, the time and space to talk about it, I think is a really awesome thing to do as well, because the integration piece does take, it's not immediate, it's a process. And reminding people gently, if it seems appropriate in that moment, that the thing might be coming up for them right now is an opportunity for them to work through what happened. And that's like a really beautiful, awesome thing, and that they deserve to heal from it as well. Also big fan of like having a sense of humor when it's appropriate. Sometimes that's hard to gauge. You don't like want to like seriously offend someone or make them upset. But if the opportunity presents itself where you can throw a little joke in or make fun of yourself or whatever, just to lighten the mood, and like maybe they'll laugh for a second and be like, oh, whoa, that actually felt good. Yeah. And the beautiful thing with psychedelics too is usually when you start laughing, it's hard to stop immediately. So that can help change the tone as well.
Yeah. I love that idea of having a chat sort of after the experience together too.
Yeah.
I think it's something that like sometimes just gets overlooked, right? About how it actually went. And if there could have been things that, if you're going to do psychedelics again with this person or with the same group, like being able to talk it through together, like this went really good, this didn't feel that great. Yeah, I love that.
Alrighty. So from the perspective of you using substances, this is the motto for every substance ever. Start low and go slow. You can always do more, but you can't do less. It's true. If you overdo it, that's where you're going to be at. Some people seek that out. I have one specific friend who, anytime I've ever taken acid with him, he will always look at me right beforehand, and he'll just be like, what if this is the time that we take too much? Like he like wants to do that. And I'm like, no, I don't think that needs to happen this time. Like, I think I'm all set with that. People do seek it out, and it's totally fine. But if that's not what you're trying to do, I highly recommend starting low and going slow. our drug market is unregulated. Again, decrim stuff, hopefully, like, we should have a safe legal supply of everything, but that could be on a different training. But you don't know, yes, you don't know exactly what you're getting all the time. So really just, testing your stuff before you use it, as well as starting off and doing tester doses beforehand is really good practice. You can always stack and do more if you need to. And you want to give it at least a couple minutes. Some psychedelics do take effect within seconds. So at least a few minutes might seem a little silly to say, but you want to give it a minute before you redose yourself, just to make sure it's not all going to be hitting you like a truck at once. Mixing drugs, a lot of people do it. It's super popular. It's really fun. Some drug combinations, like, I totally get it. Avoid it if you can, especially if you're trying a different psychedelic for the first time. So you're not like 100% sure. My friend said it was going to be like this. The internet said it was going to affect me like this. Like, if you've never done it, you have no idea. And it is so tied into like your set and setting that it might, affect you differently than it did in the past. So you just like want to minimize mixing as much as you can, so you're more prepared to deal with your trip. If you are mixing stuff, which a lot of people do it, so I'm not trying to harsh on it, but if you're going to do it, let people know what you're mixing. Don't be like the secret sniffer in the bathroom, or you can be the secret sniffer, but just like tell someone that you're also using something else in that instance. Just because, like, if something happens, it's good for the people you're with to know what you're using so they can help you to the best of their abilities. Best practice for any substance use, and for psychedelics as well, tell them where your Narcan is. It's just good practice when you're partying with people to let them know, like, hey, it's in the front pocket of my backpack, or it's in my purse, or I keep it in the kitchen cabinet over here. Just like let people know where it's at. So if something comes up, like, they're not ripping your stuff apart trying to look for it, or, not aware that you have it at all, because it could literally save your life or someone else's.
Yeah. That one's so important too, about the secret sniffer, because I think there are situations, right, where people, and I've heard people say sort of like, no, she doesn't do that, right? And so I hope that we're at a place now where Narcan, everyone would use Narcan as a safety plan, right? Because we know it's totally safe to use. And even if people don't have opioids in their system, but I think sometimes we just don't always exactly know even what our closest friends might be up to. And so just assuming like that they're doing exactly what you're doing because we're all doing it together. We've just lost people for exactly that reason, right? Where it was like, oh, they weren't doing dope, so we didn't use Narcan, because we all knew what we were doing together. And so I think that secret sniffer one is, or any sort of, I shouldn't just say sniffer, but doing whatever you're doing, just make sure you let somebody know if you're mixing, even if it's just one trusted person, one trusted friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there is, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but if people haven't used a certain substance for a long time and then they start using again, the stigma as a society we've placed on people for so long around, reinitiating certain drug use, makes people not say anything and do it alone. And that is how we lose the people we love. So just like you said, Kristen, like, even if it is just one person, just letting them know. I always, and anyone can feel free to push back on me for this. If I am in a setting where people are using drugs and someone falls out and I have no idea, like, to my knowledge, no one there uses opiates, like especially this person who seems, you know, like they're not breathing and everything. Like, I am going to give someone Narcan even if I don't know what's going on, because it's not going to like make the situation worse. Like, calling 911, especially if I don't know what's going on. But like, if I have Narcan and things have been consumed, or even if honestly I don't know if anything's been consumed and someone just looks like they're not breathing, they're going to get Narcan. That might just be, you know, me, my professional personal self mixing together. But I think it's really good practice, you know, just knowing the signs of what an overdose looks like and administering the Narcan if you have it, and rescue breathing as well, of course.
Definitely.
And that is essentially the last bullet of this. So we're following opioid OD protocol for this stuff. I say Narcan first, 911, and then start your rescue breathing. Oxygen is super critical, especially if we have any, you know, benzos. There's like tranquilizers. There's xylazine and a lot of like the opioid supply we're seeing. We've tested some samples in Boston at AHOPE recently that have come back for xylazine. So it's in our area. If it's not already in your, So I think, you know, being aware that oxygen is such an important piece, and I know with COVID it's weird, but it's really important. And I will stop ranting about oxygen. So sorry.
No. Something too about sort of the around fentanyl, you know, being in all of our drug supply, and how that gets messaged. But importantly, like, just to remind folks, like, if someone's having a bad trip and they are breathing and they are talking, and it's you know, they're maybe expressing that they're having trouble breathing, that definitely could be a medical emergency. And giving somebody Narcan, you know, looks different. If somebody is not responsive to you after you give them a sternum rub, you're checking on them and they're not breathing. But you know, there has been some reports that I've seen here in Maine where, you know, people have reported that they have gone to the hospital themselves and have overdosed after using psychedelics that were, you know, had fentanyl in it. We don't know, right? But we do know that someone's not overdosing if they're taking themselves to the hospital or to the ER. They might be having respiratory issues. It might be anxiety. It might be their heart rate. It might be a really bad fucking trip. But like, all of those things, just to be important, I guess, just to be educated around that is important.
Yeah, for sure. And so like, my best practice whenever I'm giving someone Narcan, right, is the sternum rub and all of that, but also giving them like the opportunity, right? Being like, I'm going to Narcan you if you don't respond to me. If someone, especially if they, you know, are using something and have familiarity with Narcan, like, they're going to respond to you to avoid that. Getting Narcan isn't fun. You don't want to do that to someone if you don't have to. You also can't Narcan yourself. It's impossible. If you're overdosing, like, you are not breathing. So
and this is a good segue to Fireside. Yeah. If you're in that panicky.
Yeah. So like, and this is the thing with an unregulated drug supply, right? Is that like, you can definitely have like a medical emergency. That doesn't mean that you are overdosing on fentanyl. So like, cathinones, which we'll get into, like bath salts, like N-bombs, things like that, can, like, you know, really increase your blood pressure and your heart rate, and like even cause cardiac arrest sometimes in high enough doses. Like, fentanyl is like very much demonized and vilified, and like, that is what we hear about nonstop. And I am not attempting to like diminish the impact it's had on communities. But in a completely unregulated drug supply, like, that isn't the only thing we need to worry about. And it's also not, at least in my experience and what I've seen in my area, like that's not what we're seeing in blotters. We're seeing like 2,5-I NBOME, like as fake LSD, or like some weird research chemical that has really bad effects on humans. But it's not fentanyl. So I think there's like a lot of hysteria around that, you know, it can be misinforming for sure. And like, if you are having a bad time, there is a wonderful psychedelic peer support hotline, and they just released their app too. The Fireside app. I downloaded it yesterday because I was like, it gives you, there's a page where it just gives you like positive affirmations.
Oh my God.
If you're having, so like, even if you don't want to text or like call anyone, like you can open a screen and it's like a very chill, like safari-esque colored background with just like nice things that like come in and out. So awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome idea. Good job, guys. But really awesome resource that's run by like volunteer trip sitters and harm reductionists. They are not affiliated with the police. They are not affiliated with any sort of healthcare institution. Like a lot of them are folks that use psychedelics or have a history of using psychedelics. They have been in your shoes. They can talk you through your trip. It also isn't, you know, it's a great crisis resource, but if you're just like tripping really hard and you're like, I want to talk to a friend who gets it, like you can just like call them, and like they are totally fine with you calling and like shooting the shit with them and talking about something weird and then being like, okay, bye. So that's like a really, really awesome resource that's available, and it's free. So the app is free too. Yeah. Drug checking. I started going off on the slide and then I deleted a lot of it, and I'm just going to say it out loud because I have a lot to say.
You have a lot to learn, so please.
Lots of different options for drug checking. And it's really important for you to test your substances to the best of your abilities. I know this stuff isn't super accessible. I am lucky enough, AHOPE has an FTIR mass spectrometer, which uses infrared to measure compounds within substances, and it can tell you what it's cut with and everything, and super cool. But I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, so like, you know, like I know that's not accessible for most people. So it's really important policy-wise, you know, drug checking needs to be accessible when you're getting like real-time or as close to real-time results as possible. Our country is very much behind in that, but there are resources that you can access via mail, the internet, as far as like ordering your own drug checking supplies, and then as well as like your beautiful harm reduction program. So like fentanyl test strips, I know, are at a lot of syringe exchanges. They are finicky.
We were talking about this earlier this week.
Yeah. I'm gonna be nice about them because I think that like it's super important for them to be available to people. It's the most accessible way to make sure your drugs are safe. Dilution is just like a really important aspect that there's been a lot of like back and forth information, misinformation around, because test strips were made for testing urine. And naturally harm reductionists and people who use drugs are so smart and so resourceful that they're like, we could use this to test our drugs and not our pee to make sure we're safe, which is awesome. But it really depends, again, on like how you're using your substance. Best practice with any, you know, drug checking, but especially with the test strips, you want to test all of the drug that you intend to consume. If you like sniffing your drugs, drinking them isn't going to hit quite the same. you'll get the effects. It just won't come on the same way. And it will taste gross probably. So like I totally get not wanting to do that. So like if you're injecting anything, like you're able to add water to your cooker and test the rinse. And I'm talking about, I'll clarify powdered substances here. I'll start with that. So things like MDA, MDMA, 2CI, like anything in like powdered form that can be dissolved can be tested that way. Pills as well. If you are not injecting and you are not willing to dilute your entire bag of drugs and then drink it, residue checking is going to be like the next best practice for you. Again, it's not the best one, but it's going to be like the safest next option for you outside of dissolving everything. So really just like breaking down whatever your substance is in the baggie to like the finest possible powder you can. And then like shaking that bag a lot so you're getting like a good residue coating on the inside of the baggie, then dumping your substance out onto a plate, surface, another baggie, whatever, diluting that powder and testing it that way. With things like MDMA, methamphetamine is not included in the psychedelic training, but they can give you false positives or false negatives depending on what your dilution situation is. So I believe the most recent thing that was released was that it's 1 teaspoon for every 10 milligrams, right? Yes. Cool. So,
which is great, but also if you're doing it in a hustle and you don't have a teaspoon, it's just very hard. So that's why
exactly. Like if you don't have the light and the means and like the time to like be very thoughtful measuring stuff out, like super awesome. I really love, like, you can get them at harm reduction programs, the sterile water tubes, because they're labeled with the mils, like, so at least you know, okay, like this whole thing is a teaspoon. But again, not super accessible to everyone. For things like mushrooms, for mushrooms, I'll start there. Push back on me if you want. I don't see the need to fentanyl test strip your mushrooms. You could, I guess. I personally have not heard of an instance with fentanyl contaminated psilocybin. So I'm not even going to address that. And then, like, if we're fentanyl test stripping like an acid blotter or like a gel blotter, something like that, you can just cut a little corner of the blotter off, and you're going to soak it in that 5 mils or the teaspoon of water for 10 minutes. Like, you got to let it sit for at least 10 minutes. And then you can dip the strip in and test it that way.
So you can set a little timer on your phone, go grab something else, do something else, so you're not thinking about it before you,
Yep. Yeah, you don't want to just, like, be watching it.
Torture.
Because it will be very torturous. Torturous. So, you know, again, like, not accessible to everyone, but there are a few websites. Dance Safe is one of them. Dose Test is a much more affordable Dance Safe, essentially.
Can you say that one again, Tina? What's the name of it again?
Dose Test.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And I'll confirm that too. It's either Dose Test or Dose Testing. But it's a little more affordable as far as like purchasing your own fentanyl test strips if you can't get them at a program locally. Also the reagent testing as well. So there are different, and this is what I have listed on the slide right here, different reagent tests that will test the purity of what you're getting. So for example, there is a reagent test for LSD that will turn bright purple if you're testing part of a blotter that has actual LSD, right? It turns bright purple and you're like, awesome. That's so dope. It will not turn purple if it is literally anything else. So like the N-bombs that I mentioned earlier, which is a research chemical super similar to LSD, that's actually super dangerous, especially in high doses, or especially if you were on lithium for like bipolar disorder. It can be fatal. So people still do it and make the decision to do it, and like that's rad. But if you are looking for LSD, really easy way for you to like know, okay, I have LSD, and be at peace with that. There's another one that tests for MDMA, and it can also read different colors on like different bath salts, because there's a variety of cathinones. So like
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah. So it can really help you out. All of the test kits too come with like, it's almost like a rainbow chart with like all the different hues that the test will turn depending on what the substance is, which is super cool. But that, you know, is really good practice if you're getting more into like, okay, what's my purity and what is going on here outside of like fentanyl. And then, you know, the FTIR, I love it. It's in my office. I get to look at it every day. And that will give you more specifics on like, okay, is there lactose in this? Is there sugar? Is there lidocaine or anything else weird? But again, like, I think real-time drug checking, being accessible is like the most necessary. If I have a bag of Molly and I have to wait 2 weeks, like I have to mail some out to get tested somewhere and then like wait for results for 2 weeks, like I think it would be really interesting to get the results, but I'm probably not going to wait 2 weeks to like do the Molly, you know. Yeah. So
and who knows, it might have taken you 2 weeks or more to get the Molly. So exactly. Then you're amped up and ready.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Kristen.
No, I think that's great. I did have one question just about the pills. When we're testing in the pill, can we actually leave it in the baggie as well and put the dissolve in the water for like the residue that you were talking about to test it? Is that one way to do it too? I've seen people do it that way.
Yeah. So you just want to make sure that with pressed pills, like we're getting like the fentanyl chocolate chip cookie effect in any substance, right? But like if I'm only breaking off like half of the pill and I'm crushing that in the baggie and testing that residue, that half of the pill might be good. But I don't know what's going on in the other half. So like if you are going to do that, just like you really want to break it up in a baggie to like the finest possible powder you can.
Yeah.
If you were planning on orally ingesting the pill anyways, like I would, dissolve it in water and test it and then just drink that would be my suggestion. But for something like ecstasy, it would be the same residue, but I would do the whole pill.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right,
we're gonna get into them.
We're getting into the good shit. All right. So we're gonna start off with some classics, y'all. So psilocybin, LSD, and DMT. Love it. Okay. It is embarrassing how much time I spent picking out clip art for this slideshow presentation.
They're so good. And so true to what we're talking about. So
hell yeah. So the wonderful psilocybin, also called magic mushrooms, shrooms, if you're old like me, you might call them boomers. And you can get them fresh, like fresh mushrooms, dried mushrooms, powdered and in capsules, edibles. Like there are psilocybin like chocolate bars right now where each like gram is measured out as a little square. And they have like Super Mario, like designs on them. They're pretty cool, just saying.
Cool.
But there's over 200 different kinds of magic mushrooms in the world, which is so cool. They're tryptamines, so that's the psychedelic class that they're in. They produce their effects by acting on our serotonin receptors. I love this whenever I do research on psychedelics. That's always, but the precise mechanism is unknown. I'm like, it's Mother Earth, baby. It's great.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Secrets.
Yeah. The trip experience with psilocybin, and of course this is dependent on like how much you eat. So like if you eat them in a more traditional fashion where you're not eating an eighth at a time, like you're looking at 4 to 6 hours. You're peaking around like the second or third hour after you ingest everything. And it's usually around like a 30-minute to an hour onset, depending on how strong they are and how much food is in your stomach. And other, like physical factors and stuff, like how tired are you? When did you go to bed last? But typically around 30 minutes to an hour for it to kick in. It's really hard. I love when like mushrooms are portrayed in media or like in old movies or whatever, and it's like a pink elephant magically appears in the person's bedroom. So like you might like have a lot of visual like hallucinatory effects one time when you take mushrooms, and you might not get that at all the next time, but like music is crazy to you the second time. So it's can be unpredictable, right? And no trip is going to be exactly the same. So important to keep that in mind. I like going into experiences with like some sort of intention, but no expectations, if that makes sense. Yeah. As far as like effects from psilocybin, physically, you're going to feel some body tingling. Also like some heaviness as well. Like you might get couch a little bit. You'll get unstuck eventually, but you might get stuck for some time. A little bit of sedation, pupil dilation for sure. Nausea, typically towards the beginning when the onset is happening, you might get a little bit of nausea or like weird, stomach grumbly things, but that subsides pretty quickly. You're also, you can feel really warm and fuzzy, and feel like a physical response to being in unity with the other people you're tripping with, or realizing your place in the world or whatever. Like that stuff gets super magnified. Cognitively, like I mentioned earlier, you might have the most profound thoughts you have ever had in your life, or so you think. Highly recommend writing them down because you're not going to remember any of it. It's super relaxing, hopefully, most of the time. You might feel that enhanced like empathetic self, right? More compassion, affection. You might be super chatty, really like analyzing, not even anything, super macro like the world or solving a huge social problem or whatever, but like overanalyzing the pattern on the carpet. Like you might get really into that, or something super small. It can happen, and that's why you get stuck. You might feel very euphoric. Laughing a lot is super common. It's great. Time distortion. Time moves either real slow or really fast, and it can switch off too in the same experience. Enhance creativity, or like the urge to paint or collage, or do something colorful and creative, make beats, create music, video, whatever your thing is. Chances are you're going to want to do it more when you're tripping. Feelings of mindfulness, but then also like if we get into the scary zone, like we can have feelings of darkness, doom, like end of the world kind of vibes, paranoia, ego death as well, which can be scary, but good as well. And that, cognitively tying into visual stuff, color and pattern enhancement. It's not uncommon to like look at the wallpaper or like pattern tiles or whatever, and have stuff look like it's breathing out at you a little bit, which can be really funny or really scary depending on where you're at. Things kind of melting together, color tinting, so almost like you are viewing the world through tinted sunglasses. I've had trips that were green, where everything was tinted green, where everything was tinted orange. That was like around Halloween, and it was super cool. But like, I know it was rad. But like, that is a super common experience that a lot of people have reported. Depth distortions, and something might look really far away that isn't that far away, and vice versa. Or that step down might look like it's miles beneath you and it's like 6 inches. That is a thing. And then geometric patterns at super high doses too. You can sort of start to see like the cubism stuff pop out from your surrounding environment. Other things that can happen, hallucinations. So that can be like internal hallucinations and like getting trapped in sort of thought loops. External hallucinations. So that would be like the pink elephant situation, but it won't be that ridiculous. Auditory stuff. So if you're hearing something that isn't that other, I'm not saying it's not actually there. Other people just aren't connected to that plane. And then like object transformations as well. So my story of my friend's mom's hair turning into Medusa snakes, that would fall into that category. And then synesthesia as well. So like your senses getting crossed where we're like tasting colors and stuff.
What a good word. That's one of my favorite words. Yes.
It's a beautiful word. Yeah. And then just some like combination effects I'll run through quickly, because again, like people love mixing drugs because it can be super fun and rewarding. But just to like know for harm reduction practice, right? Like cannabis is really going to amplify a lot of the effects of any psychedelic, really, especially mushrooms. So like don't rip the bong or do it, but just like be prepared that you're really going to magnify stuff for a little bit. MDMA is going to enhance visual, physical, and cognitive effects of psilocybin. It can be unpredictable. So if you're going to combine, take the psilocybin first because it will take a little bit longer to get like digested and start acting in your body, and slowly stack your MDMA. Like start with a small dose and see how you feel and gauge it that way. Dissociatives, so we're enhancing again all of the like visual and euphoric effects. They can really, if you're trying to hole yourself on ketamine where you're like in a completely dissociated state, then you just are probably going to have way more vivid visuals if you are on any sort of psychedelic. So be prepped for that. It can also be, it can elevate your nausea because a side effect of a lot of dissociatives is nausea. So if we're combining that with food poisoning, then it can make your stomach upset. Only for a little bit, and then you'll be fine. Other psychedelics, we're just magnifying everything, right? It does raise your risk if you are on an SSRI with serotonin syndrome risks. If we're stacking psychedelics, that's just going to like increase that risk. Benzos are actually like great if you're having a bad time. They help you calm down. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before. So if you're not getting them from a prescription where you're like, this is my prescription or this is my friend's prescription and I am seeing the prescription bottle with the doctor, whatever, like essentially, actually, if they are not yours, just test them because especially with benzos on the street right now, like they're being cut with fentanyl. So just like test them, because we don't want to be trying to like help someone who's having a bad time and then like making a situation way, way, way worse. And then with alcohol, you know, it's going to make you a little more sedated, a little more groggy, can also make you nauseous. It's going to really up the dehydration factor. So like drink water. Alcohol is great for the come down. But just like be aware, hey, I should like try to match this with some water or Gatorade at least, because it will dehydrate you.
Yeah. And benzos and alcohol, right, are respiratory depressants. So that also, like, if you're having breathing stuff, just remember that if you're mixing them.
Yeah. So that combination effects was just like psilocybin in that one other thing. If we're mixing multiple depressants, then we're running a risk there for sure. And I know we're running out of time. I'm sorry. I knew this would happen.
No, it's so interesting and so much. We might have to do part 2, but
we might have to do part 2.
We still have around 39 minutes or something. Yeah.
All right. It's on. We're going to do it.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to my number one favorite psychedelic of all time, LSD, also called Lucy, blotters, L, and tabs, derived from a fungus as well. It was first synthesized by my dude, Albert Hoffman. Bicycle Day just passed. I don't know if anyone celebrated, but it's on April 19th. So on April 19th, 1943, he took what would be the equivalent of like a double dose. So I believe 200 micrograms. And he rode his bike home and he had the best time ever. This art is actually from a book written about Bicycle Day. But, you know, he didn't understand what it could be used for. And also was not expecting those effects whatsoever. It has been used in academia. It was pursued as a therapeutic medication. The government nixed that, but there's exciting prospects for that now. But it was historically associated with like hippie counterculture and anti-Vietnam War movements. And like the government did not like those groups of people. So they found that it had no medical purposes or use, and they scheduled it and made it illegal. So
like many other things,
all of the fun stuff.
The war on drugs.
Yes, love it. Typical dose, like 1 tab, you're going to be getting about 100 micrograms roughly. Your trip experience, you're signing up for usually 8 to 12 hours. The gel capsules or little tablets that have become more popular, I feel like in the last decade or so, but also maybe they've been around forever and I'm just new. I have no idea. Sorry. But I have found in my experience those last a bit longer.
I think they've been around, but they haven't been as accessible, if that makes sense. Yeah. Now they're around more.
Yeah. I was just getting the not good acid. But yeah, those I have had like a 14-hour experience on like 1 gel tab. So it can vary a little bit, but that's like the median range, right? LSD has pain relieving properties, which is really cool and isn't like acknowledged super often. It's awesome for that. Can also be very stimulating. Typically, has more of a stimulant effect than some other psychedelics. Loss of appetite. You really just don't want food until you're coming down, but it's really hard to eat. You can experience like twitching and muscle contractions, sweating, that beautiful like clenched jaw and teeth grinding because of the like stimmy effects of it, right? Some nausea, your blood rate or your heart rate and your blood pressure can be elevated a little bit throughout the experience. It's usually not for the entire duration, but you can experience like little peaks. You feel super euphoric, You can feel a lot of different emotions at once, which can be confusing because they're all felt very strongly. Time distortion again, essentially a ton of the same cognitive effects as psilocybin. You're just, again, getting more of the stimulant effects. So like the wakefulness, as well as like you're signing up for like a 12-hour trip, even if that crosses into like 5 o'clock in the morning, like, and you're doing it that way, you'll be up to hear the birds sing, which can be nice and not nice.
It's so interesting though, because people don't really connect LSD with stims, right? Like, and it's once we actually learn more about the drugs we're taking, it's just really cool to learn about why that trip would be so long and we wouldn't. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, there's they call themselves third wave, which I don't think was well thought through at all. But like all of the dudes in Silicon Valley that are like the techies, right? Like started something called the third wave, which was based on microdosing LSD to start, and they've like expanded to other psychedelics, but like a lot of them microdosed LSD for productivity. And focus, and it works. I microdosed LSD for 2 years before I started getting. I'm sure you do. I don't think it was LSD the whole time, but that's okay. And that's why drug checking is so important. But it helped me. It really did. And I now have my ADHD treated with psychostimulants, which are also super helpful and safer for me because I know what I'm getting. But it's super real. And like you said, it's like not really, that correlation isn't made a lot. And then, you know, again, we're just seeing a lot more. It is like mushrooms essentially, but magnified by 100 and lasting longer. Alrighty. Combination effects, very quickly. Alcohol and benzos are depressants, dangerous to combine them, but like same thing, really good if someone's having a bad time or you just like need help for the come down, because the come down, especially depending on what time of day or night it starts to happen, and what wild adventures you've experienced earlier in the trip, like you might want to smooth out the come down a little bit. Just be mindful again about like your physical self and like where you're at with your nausea and how sick you feel, and also like drinking your water. Dissociatives, again, they're really going to escalate like the visual component of LSD, but they're also going to make like the potential negative like hallucinations and delusions a little more of a risk, as well as psychosis. Combining with MDMA, this is candy flipping, is like one of the classic psychedelic combinations. There is some research saying that it can be a neurotoxic combination. I personally would like to see more literature on that, just because it is such a common combination that has been done for so long. So it can be done safely, but just really, again, like take your LSD first, just gauge that trip as is, and then slowly take your ecstasy if you feel like you need to. DMT, moving right along. DMT can be found.
What a perfect picture for DMT.
I know, right? I wish I was her right now. But it's one of the simplest psychedelic compounds. So we're finding DMT and like ayahuasca, for example. So it can be like in different plants. It's also a chemical that your brain can release. It's super short-lived, but super intense. So if you work a 9 to 5, highly recommend DMT for you, because you can schedule it in, like have a quick trip and then go about the rest of your day. So it's great for that, to the point where like vaping DMT is super common. So which I think is fantastic. But it works on your serotonin receptors to produce those effects. Smoked or vaped, 5 to 20 minutes is all you're signing up for.
Yeah.
So cool. So
it is
like,
so cool.
That's awesome.
So controlled. Like you have so much control over that for you. Yeah.
Yeah. You do like, you're losing complete awareness of yourself and your body and your surroundings. So like, even though you can vape DMT, like vaping it at the bar is probably, again, like more power to you if that is your flex. And I respect it and appreciate it. But like, you want to kind of set yourself up in a place where it's like, can I sit on this couch for 20 minutes? Like, you want to make sure you're not in a position where you can fall. You want to make sure you're with people that you feel safe around, that aren't going to do anything weird while you are not in your body. And anecdotally, like everyone's like, it's blast off. I get blasted off into another dimension and I see the blue goddess. The blue goddess always shows up. But you're in a completely different world within seconds. So very rapid onset, 5 to 20 minutes. Pretty dope. Really for interactions, because it is so short-lived, you want to be cautious when, if you're taking lithium. Lithium mixed with psychedelics, specifically DMT, because it is so potent, you are running a risk of potential psychosis and seizures. So it's just something to be aware of. A question I've gotten at this training in the past around like SSRIs and lithium is, what is the best harm reduction practice around if I do have bipolar disorder actually, so I can use myself as an example. Like, do I stop taking my meds if I know I'm going to this festival or we're going on a friend's getaway and everyone's smoking DMT and taking acid? Like, what, should I go off my meds in order to do that more safely? Which is something I've thought about a lot, and I don't think it's a yes or no answer, because I think only you know if it's safe for you to come off your meds. I mean, like chemically, like on that level, sure. After 2 weeks, that stuff won't be in your system at the levels that it would interact in such a negative way with psychedelics, but sacrificing your stability on medication if it's working for you is like a really big decision. Just in case someone was going to ask that, I still don't have the perfect answer for that.
No, I think it's a great question to bring up, because I was actually talking to someone today about the training that we were doing, and they had mentioned that they would love to do acid again and had really positive effects in their life. But they've recently been put on SSRIs and those are really working for them, and that was a risk for them. And so they're sort of waiting to play it out and see how they feel, if they continue to feel good on their SSRIs, and even said that they might talk about with their doctor, who they think is really cool, to sort of say, like, what are my risks if I stop taking them? What are my risks, even if I'm doing them while still taking them, and kind of like safety plan around that, which I really appreciated having that conversation today, because I think thinking about like dosing and how we do that, it also shows how we can dose those things, and along with our prescription medication, or thinking about those in the same world is like such a nice world if we could live in that world, right? So that made me think of that when he was talking about it too. Yeah. Sorry, I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to stop interrupting you. But
no, you're fine. We're not going to get through everything, and it's okay.
That's okay. It's going to put us together to talk about these things.
Cannabis, you're going to have a hard time once you blast off. Lighting a joint, smoking isn't going to really be a thing you're doing. But if you're smoking a bunch of weed and then decide to use DMT, there is an increased risk for like bad psychological reactions, right? So like anxiety, paranoia, potentially it could push you into like a panic attack or psychosis, especially if you have other stuff going on there. Don't, again, do what you want, but best harm reduction practice, don't get like super ripped before you use DMT. Yeah. It will be great for you after, and it's only 5 to 20 minutes. So just a word of thought. Stimulants, like they do with any other substance, like, and that includes like prescribed stimulants, so like Adderall, Ritalin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, cathinones, like any sort of stimulant you're taking. DMT can increase your risk of anxiety, paranoia, panic attacks, your like really not fun thought loops that you get stuck in. It can push you into sort of like a manic state as well. So just being aware as well. I am a person that takes stimulants every single day. So like my personal harm reduction practice around, I can't really do this with DMT, but like I just dose my psychedelics a little bit lower than I did when I was not taking a psychostimulant every day, just to sort of see how I feel. I just started a little bit lower of a dose than I usually do. And again, just like making sure that nice people are close by to reassure me if needed. Cool. We are going to talk about cough syrup in this too, because why not? So moving. We have to. Yeah. So MDMA and MDA, ketamine, close tie for number one favorite, and then DXM. So MDMA and MDA, talk about MDMA first. Molly is like really what I hear called, what I call it, ecstasy as well, if it's pressed into like pill form. It's a synthetic drug. It's a derivative of amphetamine, so you're going to get those like stimmy effects, which is one of the reasons why it's a really popular club drug. You can dance forever, and it feels amazing. So it acts both as a stimulant and a hallucinogen. It's an empathogen. So we're increasing our awareness and empathy of the self and other people. It's used therapeutically, especially if we're talking about PTSD treatment. There's been a lot of research done on that. And it is being, used in trials right now, and is hopefully going to actually be treatment that is accessible to people soon, because it's super successful. Also, again, club drug festivals. It's one of the more easily and like more frequently adulterated drugs on the market. And by that, I am not talking about just fentanyl contamination. I want to say that. MDA, I forgot this existed until kind of recently, until I did this training. I forgot all about SAS somehow. Forgot all about it, but it's a thing. So super, super similar in effects to MDMA. It's just going to be you're going to get less of like the melty, warm, like I love you man vibes from, you'll still get some, but it won't be as much as Molly. Both are going to, help you be a little more social, enhance sensation of touch. So like stuff just feels better. It's like the best way I can say that. Like material feels better. Drinking liquid feels better. Everything is better. It's usually sold by the gram. We're starting off like with 1 to 2/10 of a gram. So we're starting small. Typically 4 to 6 hours. It is one of those drugs because it is super fun and makes you feel good. And it also has those stimulant properties, like the constant redosing, like the urge to do that is super strong, especially when you start to feel the peak subside a little bit because you're like, no, I don't want that to go away. So just like be mindful of how much you're redosing and also how much you are using, or the frequency at which you're using rather. In your come down, a lot less serotonin is going to be released from your brain, right? Taking a booster before you start to feel that way is like essential, because when your serotonin is gone and your brain, doesn't have any more to give, it's not going to, taking more isn't going to help you not feel like that, unfortunately. I wish it did. But you want to, if you're going to redose, try to catch yourself in your peak beforehand. My experience coming down from MDMA, you kind of feel like garbage. You're just like bummed out. Things aren't as like bright and shiny. Not really social. You might be super tired, like don't really want to do anything. Totally normal, because like your brain just like had a serotonin party for you and it was awesome, but now you're tired and you need to like recover for a little bit. It's usually only going to put you out for like maybe a day. And there are lots of different factors that go into that sort of like recovery period, I guess. But you're not going to be stuck feeling like that forever either. For aftercare, 5-HTP, you can get it at like a GNC vitamin store, Whole Foods, like whatever. It's a serotonin replacer, super awesome to take like after. You don't want to take it before, because we're like putting extra serotonin in your brain, which can be risky, right? So this is like aftercare specifically, like to help your bad vibes go away. Sleep, eating healthy food, which I know is like very much a privilege, but like the healthiest food you have access to is super good practice. Like cut back on like sugar as much as you can, at least the day after, because that's super dehydrating. Drink water and Gatorade. Get your electrolytes back. So again, with medications, and if anyone has anything to chime in about like MAOIs specifically versus SSRIs, I would love to hear it, because the more I have researched this, the more confused I get around like what I thought I knew around like the differences between how the effects of MDMA are impacted by both. So please like fact check me on this if you want to. But, consuming MDMA along with another drug that's using the same liver enzyme to metabolize is going to metabolize it much more slowly. Opioids and opioid like derivatives, MDMA, because of the stimulant effects, can mask sedation. So you might not be feeling the effects of your opiates as much as you should, if that makes sense. So you could, it could lead to an OD, or you just like really not feeling good because you overdid it, because you weren't getting those like effects that you were looking for from your opioids. Alcohol as well, like you really want to be matching your alcohol with water. Super common to mix MDMA and alcohol, like they go hand in hand. Both just really dehydrate you. So you want to make sure that you're trying to offset that a little bit with water. And then we talked about candy flipping already. So I'll leave that at that. Ketamine. So it's a dissociative. I threw it in here because it does have psychedelic properties, and it's also used in combination with classic psychedelics a lot. It is an anesthetic dissociative drug, mild analgesic as well. So it has like some pain relieving properties, which is awesome. It's used medically for those purposes as well as a tranquilizer. Again, like, I don't know if y'all have ketamine infusions up in Maine being offered for like behavioral health stuff. We have some spots in Massachusetts. It just isn't covered by insurance yet, so it's not accessible at all. But there is a lot of research going into that. You're kind of separating your mind from your physical body, if that makes sense. So it's like if you are sort of hovering above yourself, watching yourself through a tiny TV screen. Or like you are within your brain in your head watching yourself through a tiny, it gets weird. But you're just kind of floating outside of your body in a non-scary way. But, you know, it can really help with depression, which makes it like a really, really valuable psychedelic. You can also like microdose it to a point. So some people go for it and they intentionally K-hole. People look for that experience, and that can be super healing and helpful for people to get into. It just can be dangerous because you are not aware of your surroundings or in control of your body. So making sure you're with people you trust that can watch your back. Don't take a bath. Don't go in the tub or any body of water and K-hole yourself, or just be on ketamine in general. It can be dangerous. Where I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. So cool thing about ketamine, it only lasts like an hour. Pretty low commitment. You're going to get the giggles a lot. Some side effects, like there is some nausea associated with it. Typically at like the onset, the very beginning, that'll subside. You might feel a little lightheaded, dehydrated, a little bit dizzy, which is why it's really good to make sure you're somewhere where you can be sitting down. You also can, like, you know, completely lose track of who you are at higher doses. Block legs. I don't have like a good term outside of block legs, but like your physical body and being able to operate it is going to feel weird. It feels like your feet are very heavy and stuck to the ground, and it takes immense effort to pick them up and take a step forward. So stuff to be expecting for that. Definitely recommend starting low and slow with that, so you can do a little bump before you rip a big line, or like take a little bump before you do an IM administration, just to see where you're at. Combining ketamine with depressants like alcohol, benzos, and opioids, sedation, not great. So it can lead to unexpected loss of consciousness at super high doses of ketamine. Vomit aspiration is a huge risk here if someone isn't on their side. It's also going to be hard to know, right? Like, I'm super high on ketamine. Dosing myself with my opioids or my benzos, or like keeping track of how much alcohol I'm drinking, is going to be way trickier, which can lead to like OD situations. Super similar GHB. It's a risk just, you know, with GHB alone to kind of experience unconsciousness. So combining the two increases that risk. The sedation, you know, potentiates a lot. Higher risk of overdose there. And weirdly, grapefruit juice increases the oral absorption of ketamine. And again,
this is one of my favorite harm reduction tips.
Yeah. So like, believe it or not, if you have drink grapefruit juice and you do ketamine, it's going to like double your ketamine, which could be kind of like a money saver in some ways, but also it's going to make it last longer, and also like you're not going to have the best time if you're just trying to drink juice. So
I wonder if that has ever happened with anyone, accidentally drinking grapefruit juice while on ketamine.
I kind of want to try just to see. I can report back.
Safely dosing, safely.
I want to be cognizant of 12 minutes left. Is there stuff you really want me to hit in 12 minutes?
I think, I'm not sure what's coming for the rest of the slides, but I think if we do cough syrup and get through that, we can kind of breeze through some other things. I can help. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
But I think DXM is important.
Yeah. So DXM, I didn't realize how much of a thing this was. Like, I tripped on DXM in high school, like eating triple C's and then puking and having a terrible time. But it's actually like very popular, especially like, and this is like me showing my ignorance and privilege in a lot of ways of like, people get drug tested, right? So you can go to CVS and trip your face off and not get in trouble, at least with your drug testing. So I just wanted to acknowledge myself there for a second. But it's legal to buy, sell, and possess. It's over the counter. Thinking about Robitussin, like that is the go-to. It's a semi-synthetic derivative of morphine, so it doesn't cause the same level of respiratory depression, but that's why it's so helpful. Like if you have a terrible cough, it will kind of like help those muscles relax. Tripping on DXM is called robo-tripping, most commonly. Dexing, skittling as well, especially with the triple C skittling. Low doses can give you like a mild stimulant effect. I've had folks describe it to me as like getting a good alcohol buzz on. So it like really makes them social, makes them feel good, makes them feel confident. Moderate doses, you're going to feel more bodied, like physically in that way, more sedated. Like again, compared to like being drunk or being super stoned. And then your high doses of DXM, when you're like full-blown robo-tripping, are super dissociative. But with really sort of like the paranoia aspects are super hard in that. I have seen that look like a PCP high, like a really unpleasant PCP high, or kind of like a dissociative like ketamine where you're like in a K-hole. You might not be at like PCP level freak out yet, but like you're floating outside your body and you're not really able to be aware of your surroundings. There are super quickly, so like there are plateaus. Again, I did not know this. There is like a whole Reddit community and internet community just about like psychonauts on DXM exploring the different plateaus that this drug can get you at, which is super fascinating. Plateau number 4 typically is considered to be super high risk, just because you're completely confused. You can experience psychotic breaks. That one is, it's usually highlighted in like all red whenever I read about it online. I would say the most common are like looking for a trip would be like plateau number 2. And this is based on my research and not on my personal experience. Still kind of in control of yourself, but you are having like super choppy, weird, distorted visuals, like lots of laughing. Might be a little incoherent, like speech is slurred, but you're still in contact with the outside world and reality. It might be really hard for you to move your body, but you're still there. And that can last for like up to 6 hours. Yeah,
and plateau 4, I have seen, folks when we're talking about moving their bodies, like be just really confused and disoriented and maybe in traffic and not able to move fast enough out of the road and sort of things like that situation. So it's pretty serious once it gets sort of to that level, and not fun, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely not fun for sure. Especially, you know, like it's really dangerous if you like can't physically get yourself out of harm's way.
Yeah.
If you're predisposed to any mental health stuff like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, like I can say my cousin is bipolar and has schizoaffective disorder, and he loves DXM. That is his drug of choice. And he, you know, the last time he hit plateau 4, like I think 5 months ago at this point, unfortunately, he lived with my grandmother, and like the police had to be called because he was just out of his mind and he was so confused. He didn't know who she was. Like I don't need to get into details, but it got to the point where it was that much of a crisis for his safety. Like we had to like get him to a hospital, and we could not do it on our own. And that's it's shitty to have to do that. And it's definitely like, he was not having a good time. He was not enjoying his trip. So I think it's important to remember that too, is that like, that's not what people are typically looking for. I'm sure some people do, and that's fine, but classically not what people are looking for. And then quickly, just combinations. Depressants are going to magnify the sedation, you know, can lead to unexpected loss of consciousness. Vomiting is super likely. DXM on its own, vomiting is super likely. It's super harsh on your liver, because you're not supposed to drink that much cough syrup or eat that many quercetins. Like
even your stomach lining, right?
It's really, can lead to a lot of like digestive and stomach issues. So like adding stuff that also is going to make you feel nauseous, puking is probably likely. Amphetamines, like that can push you into a panic attack. You're really going to be escalating your heart rate there. Also, again, like if you have any mental health issues, like it could push you into that sort of situation. Serotonin syndrome increases just because it's a serotonergic substance. Sorry, I could say it at one point.
Very hard to say.
Thank you. It's the end of the day too. Benzos, again, super helpful to mellow some stuff out in small doses. Test your benzos before you use them. Test them. Test them. So, and then like if we're throwing a bunch of benzos at someone, like not going to be great. Same thing with opioids, with the respiratory depression, and then serotonin syndrome with your SSRIs. So this is where I'm at, but also
could we
3 minutes. So
okay, so how about can we skip to sort of some of the last, just through the overview, and we'll hopefully come back to do these guys in part 2. But I know you had maybe the synthetic cannabinoids. I know we don't have a lot of time, but if you want to leave that slide up, that might be good for a second.
Yeah, I can just leave it up.
Okay, just because we do see a lot of bath salts in K2 and spice too, and talk to a lot of folks about that. So it might be good just to have up there. And we can share this beautiful presentation on our Facebook page as well, so people have that information. Is there anything else that you want to add to? This has been so helpful, and I know I've learned a lot. So I'm sure folks have learned a bunch just about different psychedelics, and even knowing what families they live in, different places, and what effects they have on our body, and how to mix them with other things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to close, like I again am like super happy and honored that I got to spend the last 2 hours talking about drugs with you guys. I think it's really important to have these conversations. because a lot of people use drugs, and we like to ignore that fact. So I think holding space and getting more comfortable with like open and honest discussions around drug use is really critical in like keeping each other safe, and also sharing information, and feeling less alone in whatever you're going through. You know, I'm just like super stoked that I got to do this. And I'm sorry I ramble and I didn't get to hit the good stuff.
No,
all the good stuff. But
I think we had a lot of good stuff. I think we had a lot of good stuff. It was just so nice to be together, and I can't echo that anymore, just around having safe spaces to talk about these things and really talk about them in a real way. And then opening it up for people to be able to share their experiences with us too is just always the best, and you're the best. So thank you for being with us. And I see your little Maine Access Points t-shirt on.
I know, I wore it all day. I had to.
Thank you so much. And then T, if you do want to share the last page, and if I don't know if your email was on there, but if anyone,
it is.
Okay, beautiful. If anyone did want to reach out to Tina with any specific questions that maybe they didn't feel like they wanted to share through the chat, or to us at our Maine Access Points website, and we'll have this posted up on our Facebook and also our YouTube page. And we hope that you found it as helpful as I know I have. And much love. Stay safe. Please test your drugs. Test your drugs if you haven't got that out. And if you have questions about that too, we can all sort of get together and try to figure that out, how to get you access. Maine is a little.
Please ask me.
Yes, but we would love to figure out a way and brainstorm. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much love. Bye.